4. What's up? We got The Flash, Season 4, Episode 7, Therefore I Am. I almost made edit. There was a blooper that I'm going to have to end the video where I almost said Season 3. Okay, blooper. But anyway, this episode starts off with a flashback to Clifford DeVoe 4 years ago, where he's teaching, but his students are kind of doing it, playing on their phones, not listening to anything this guy said. So when the class ends, his wife Marlise DeVoe comes in and says, "Oh yeah, hello," and they start thinking about how she was bored in one of her classes, and he starts talking about a thinking cap that he is going to work on. Meanwhile, in the present day, or i.e. 2017, is when the season takes place. But I'm going to call it the present day because 2022, yeah. Perry and Joe are questioning DeVoe and his wife, and they're just saying, "Oh yeah, they're just nice, normal people." And he's like, "Do you know any of these people? Like Becky Sharp?" And he's like, "Who?" "Ralph Dibny, Ramsey Deacon, Mia Shaitan." And then he's like, "Mia Shaitan." And she was like, "Wasn't she that person that used to work for you?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, sorry to see her go." He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "How'd you?" He's like, "How? Where'd you used to live, DeVoe? Did you live in Central City?" He's like, "No, he used to live in South Africa. But then he moved to Central City, and that's where he met his wife. And they dated, fell in love, got married, and they've been together ever since. Perfect family. Too bad that their perfect family are a bunch of villains." So yeah. So after leaving, Barry, they just have a little. He's like, they start talking about samurai, and then they leave, and so yeah. So Barry starts becoming obsessed, basically thinking, "Oh yeah, it's gotta be a coincidence that this guy loves samurai when we had a samurai attack the city." So So he decides to watch DeVoe teach one of his classes, which I think is kind of creepy, but still, it's Barry. So what are you gonna do? It's Barry Allen. So he decides to be like, "Oh, yeah." He's like, first my home, then my school. What are you doing here, Barry? Stalking me?" He's like, "Barry, I was supposed to be you're supposed to be ruling me out of your investigation, but it seems like you've already thinks you got your guy." And he's like, "No, this is just procedure." So what do? They decide to call the police on Barry's ass, and decide to. Sorry for saying ass, but it's totally, they said to call the police on Barry, and they're like, "Hey," it's like, "Hey, what's up? First my home and then my school. Aren't we safe?" And she's like, "This is supposed to be a police department." And he's like, "I'm sorry, Mr. DeVoe." And she says, his name is Professor DeVoe. Like, okay. So, meanwhile, back in the past, DeVoe and his wife decided to want to use their thinking cap. So they decide to use the particle accelerator to do it. So DeVoe and his wife, and so we see Cisco and Kate. So for some reason, we see past Eberthal Walls and Caitlin decide to go there, and I just love Earbuds. And Barry and Iris are there, but obviously, as we saw in the pilot of the first season, Iris has to leave because someone steals her dissertation. Barry goes after it, blah blah blah. You know. But here's the thing that they didn't show in the pilot of the first season. Devon and his wife have some questions for Thornwells for Eobard Thornwells about his plans, about what could happen with a particle accelerator. He's like, it's gonna create like a big thing. So after they leave, they decide to go. So he decides to put on the thinking cap, and he gets powers. So yeah, but the team decides to check, and they're like, there is no residual energy in Clifford DeVoe. He just seems like a nice, normal man. So he's like, hey, we'll just still cover our bases. And he's like, well, I bet he mentions about how he's like, hey, we've had people turn out to be bad guys, be wheelchair bound, and they turned out to be bad guys. And then Cisco points at Harry, and Harry's like, yeah, that's not me. I love Harry. He's the best character. He's just like, that wasn't him, and it wasn't. So one day Barry's in Star Labs, where he hears a beeping. First he thinks it's his phone, because when you hear a beeping, you obviously think it's your phone first. But then he goes to the samurai helmet and opens it and sees that there's a beeping sign in it, which he connects, get it, to Clifford DeVoe's house. So he goes to his house, basically speeding in, and he's doing that as Marlies is going in. So, but Barry leaves. So yeah. So Barry's like, hey guys, I heard this beeping that the samurai head was making, and they're like, there doesn't seem to see any beeping in it. He's like, well, I connected it to, and she's like, what'd you do? How'd you connect it? And he's like, you didn't go into their house, did you? He's like, well, if DeVoe didn't have any reason to get you this time, he has a reason now, because you just broke into their house. So yeah, so basically, Marlies decides to call Singh and basically be like, yo, Singh, Barry's harassing us. He needs to stop. And then Marlies slaps Barry, and she says, leave us alone. And then he's like, I thought I told you to stay away. I thought I told you to stay away from these people. And he's like, yeah, but Singh, there's a. And he's like, why would you want to hurt a loving wife and his professor? He's like, Barry, you're on leave until effective immediately. And also, again, DeVoe decides to put a restraining order on Barry. So Barry decides, so even though she's like, Iris still says the cringy line, we are the Flash, because it's cringy, but it's still there. So Barry decides she's like, hey, Mr. Allen, aren't you violating your restraining order? And he's like, I didn't come here to violate your, if you think this is a big problem, Mr. DeVoe, you can call the cops right now. So he's like, I just wanted to look you in the eye and see, who are you? And he's like, you may look like a nice, normal guy to most people, but I just want to know who are you really, DeVoe? And he's like, he was born on the same. He's like, who am I talking to, Barry or the Flash? Best line. And he's like, he was born the same night Barry was, when the particle accelerator came on. When the particle accelerator went off. And yeah, speaking of that, after Particle Accelerator went off, they thought he had ALS. So they were like, hey, they weren't going to let their plan defeat them. So anyway, so he's like, hey, Barry, you really thought, he's like, hey, we have the smartest minds in all the universe. And he's like, ha ha ha, you're Council of Wells. No one can defeat me. You've defeated villains before, like Thawne, Savitar, Zoom. They were just playing with kid guns. You're dealing with a big guy now, Barry. I love this. I love this scene because he's such a good actor, and the way that he plays the scene is really good. So Barry's like, hey, I went to visit Devo, and he's like, Barry, that dude can have you arrested. And he's like, yeah, he didn't want me arrested. He wanted me to talk. He's like, why? He's like, first off, he knows he's the Flash, and then everyone's like, oh yeah, because he tried to tell Iris before that Thawne and his wife are supervillains, and that she's like the mechanic that helps them around. So now that they finally believe Barry, they're like, yeah, he's like, DeVoe hasn't been one step ahead of us. He's been playing a chess game that we didn't even know we were playing. So he's like, so Cisco's like, yeah, let's name this guy the Thinker. What's Cisco's best character? So then Wally comes back out of nowhere, and they're like, how's Blue Valley? And he's like, well, they fought a giant octopus he fought a giant octopus in space. A starfish in space. Too bad we didn't see that. And he's like, hey, I guess you finally got name of the bus Mez. Do you want to take him down? He's like, nah, it's his move. So back with DeVoe and his wife, DeVoe's like, hey, he thought he saw a one timeline where they called him the teacher, and the teacher is a terrible name, so he says he really likes the Thinker. And then he starts having so she's like, you need the chair, and then she reveals that DeVoe's wig is fake, and and you can see his brain. So she puts the chair on, and they're like, and she puts the chair on him, and she's like, are you really gonna let Barry and Iris get married? And she's like, what's intelligence without love? What's war without love? So that was a really good episode. I loved DeVoe as the villain. Like last season we had Savitar, and he wasn't that good. Like, he was okay. But this episode we finally have a non-speedster villain. Thank G. That was right here decided not to go with another speedster as our villain. We have a villain who's calculating, a villain who's threatening, and a villain who's basically the Flash, the gang have been playing chess with him, but they had no idea what game of chess they've been playing, and DeVoe has been pulling the string since the beginning, basically getting Barry out of the Speed Force. Everything's been going on with the Samurai. Everything has been DeVoe's game, and now Team Flash know what game they're playing. Now that they know they're playing DeVoe's game, they'll have to see what they can do to defeat DeVoe's game. So anyway, next episode we have part 3 of the crossover event. First episode is Supergirl, next is Arrow, then it's Legends. So actually next is Legends, then it's Arrow, but technically after this episode we have the crossover event, Crisis on Earth X, for the Legends, where the team is going up against evil soldiers. So anyway, but that was it for this video, and I'll see you next time for more of The Flash. This episode was real good, but I gotta show you that blueprint where I messed up and called it season 3 instead of season 4. What's up? We got The Flash season 3. Wait, what season?